to push the Ukrainian government to investigate Joe Biden. And now the narrative all over the right this morning, if you read all of their, posts and tweets, is somebody needs to look into Joe Biden. Joe Biden's got something wrong. His son, look into the son. But what the foreign minister said, the part of the translation that I saw online, in which he said, we work with parties on both sides of the United States. We weren't trying to do anything here that was illegal, that was off key. We work with everyone regardless of who they are. And now you have the Trump people trying to push back and sort of erase the part of the Giuliani part of the story, and to try to shift the narrative onto the part of the story that has to do just with Joe Biden. What do you think?
Oh, there's so much to say about this story. As for the Ukrainian denials, what are the Ukrainians going to do? Come out and say, yes, Donald Trump did pressure our president 8 times in a single phone call. I mean, it's absurd, Pompeo citing that. You're right about the pivoting, as is Malcolm. Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, was on CNN this morning. He tried to pivot to we need to investigate Biden's son. When Jake Tapper said, well, what about Trump's kids? He didn't want to talk about that. I mean, you have to admire the brazenness of the hypocrisy when it comes to Donald Trump's attacks on his opponents. For this president, of all presidents, to attack the child of a rival? I mean, should we talk about Ivanka Trump and her Chinese trademarks? And should we talk about Don Jr. and Eric and the Trump organization and the non-existent Chinese wall between them and the guy in the Oval Office? I mean, it's the irony beyond irony. But the Republicans are good at this stuff. They're shameless. They're brazen. They take advantage of the whole media, both sidesism. And therefore, they're going to continue doing this. And I think Trump's going to carry on doing this stuff because, Joy, one thing that's missing from your timeline that you showed at the start, for me, a very crucial date, July 25th is the day he made the call to the Ukrainian president, allegedly 8 times pressured him to investigate Biden's son. What happened on July 24th? The day before, Robert Mueller testifies in Congress saying this president has not been exonerated. This president could still be indicted after he leaves office. And what happens? Nothing. No change in the Democratic leadership's position on impeachment. So if you're Donald Trump and you see, wait a minute, I can get away with 2016, why wouldn't you do it again in 2020?
Yeah. And the thing is, Malcolm, is that there is this interesting, there's a bifurcation here in this story, in that the Giuliani part of the story is about whether or not he's trying to get an investigation going. There is no reporting that I've seen, whether it's the Wall Street Journal, whether it is the Washington Post or the New York Times, that says the call was about the investigations necessarily. But then there is this tie to the money. Because the thing that they may or may not have even known was happening was that the money that should have gone to Ukraine for their defense was actually on hold. So we don't know whether the conversation was about, hey, about the money, about the aid that was being held up to Ukraine. These could have been 2 separate conversations. And even if they're part of the same scandal, the conversation didn't necessarily have to be Donald Trump repeating what Rudy Giuliani was doing. It could have simply been about the money. The foreign minister talked about this being serious conversations about serious issues. They didn't say what it was about. But what do you think about that? Because the question is, if Donald Trump was talking to them about their aid and how they could get it or not get it, that is the same scandal, which would mean you can't get the money unless you do what I want.
Well, I always use what I call Nance's law, and that is coincidence takes a lot of planning. And in this circumstance, the planning is phenomenal. There is no way that anyone can believe that Ukrainian defense allocation was suddenly held up, which, by the way, benefits only Moscow and only places pressure on the Ukraine. That was actually a surprise around the Capitol that was being done, that the United States was considering not giving that lethal aid to the Ukraine. So the Ukrainians know that. So they're between Iraq, Vladimir Putin and his forces, which are literally killing the Ukrainian soldiers every day, in a new hard place. Donald Trump literally going to hold up lethal aid to the Ukraine, which it took years for us to get to them, in order to benefit Vladimir Putin. So if you're Zelensky, you're going to sit there and say, look, I'm going to try to finesse this. Donald Trump's supposedly a deal maker. He doesn't understand. Donald Trump in this circumstance looks like he's working for Moscow.